completely and safely. And they come in like, big, almost like COVID-19 PPE, so that they're not in danger of breathing anything in. And they take it all away, and you can, it is extremely dangerous stuff.
Terry Ann Berry, thank you very much for your time. Associate Professor at the School of Building Construction. Finally, for our Monday and to our Made in New Zealand segment, every week we profile a small New Zealand company. And today we are talking about Spread the Love. This is a young enterprise scheme and involves 3 students from Wā Ora Montessori. To find out about this project, we're joined by Olivia Eri-Rivera, the CEO of Spread the Love. Olivia, kia ora. Welcome to the program.
Hi. Hi, how's it going today?
I'm very well, thank you. Tell us about this scheme.
Sure thing. So we're Spread the Love, and our product is chocolate fudge protein cookie crumbs. So they're choc fudge flavoured biscuit crumbs. We work with the company Justine's, and they do amazing cookies. They've been super helpful throughout all of this. And so we make these crumbs.
Beautiful. How did you come? What was the impetus behind setting it up, Olivia?
So we went into our business studies class at the beginning of the year, knowing that we wanted to help others. Yeah, we wanted to help others, and we thought that the best way to do so was by creating a healthy product that could help others eat healthily.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so you came up collectively with the 3 of you with this idea, and you give, 70% of the profits away?
Yeah, so we're a social enterprise, and to make us really stand out from other social enterprises, we're giving 70% of the profits from each bag sold to Kiwi Kids in Need through the Salvation Army Food Bank. We'll be providing them with Justine's healthy protein cookies, as a lot of the food donated lacks a lot of nutrition, so things like cans of spaghetti, crackers, white bread, they're just intended to fill you up quickly and be as cheap as possible. But we want to provide these healthy protein cookies as they're really filling, really tasty, and totally nutritional for the kids.
Hey, all the best for the business, Olivia, and well done.
Thank you.
And it sounds tasty as
I
well.
love that so much. I looked at their website and it's, gluten-free and sugar-free and I was looking at it with my eyes going, wow, can it be this good for you? What a fantastic product.
Wonderful to see initiative from such young people there, Greg.
Sounds delicious too, and I'd probably mix it with ice cream so that my bad eating habits then went to support people in need. I think that's sort of a self-justification for me and my sweet tooth.
Pretty cool thing they're doing at schools these days, Ali. Starting up small businesses. If you have an idea, you get sort of this kind of business mentoring. It's kind of neat, eh?
Yes, and it prepares young people for the real world and for the jobs market and for, the business scene far better than anything we did at school.
Yeah, it kind of comes back full circle to your I've been thinking about how we need to be, mindful of the future.
Thank you for making that connection, Wallace.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime. Ali Moore, Greg Brownless, thank you very much for being with me today. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow, 3:45. Till then, bye.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, the Cook Islands travel bubble is expected to float before Christmas. We have the details. Why were Aussies given special exemptions during COVID to come here and work on a horse racing track when other businesses say they're struggling to get workers in? There's no nudge, wink or cup of tea deal for Epsom. Instead, Judith Collins goes all out in her endorsement of the ACT Party leader. Following a surprise resignation and some serious mudslinging, stand by for National to announce its new candidate for the Auckland Central Electorate. Australia has its deadliest day yet, with COVID-19 deaths in Victoria overnight reaching 19, and the audit of sacked Minister Ian Galloway's expenses. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. The National Party leader Judith Collins says she's mystified by the government's timing for opening a travel bubble with the Cook Islands. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she expects the bubble to open by the end of the year. Ms Collins says an explanation is needed.
What I can't understand is quite what's the difference between, say, October and December. Is it safe? Then is it going to take them that long to do anything? Is it going to take them that long to decide? And it's a very strange sort of announcement to have right now in the middle of an election campaign to say that they're thinking about having an announcement.
Judith Collins. The Cook Islands tourism industry is voicing disappointment the bubble may be months away. A spokesperson, Liana Scott, says they've been waiting a long time for an indicative date.
End of the year really doesn't give us much comfort anyway. We've got our wage subsidy finishing here in the islands at the end of September, and there's some very, very worried businesses, especially with tourism contributing more than 75% towards GDP. It's a very big worry.
Liana Scott says no one knows how long COVID-19 will be around for, so there needs to be some kind of normality. Sole mothers, some of whom have become jobless because of COVID-19, are seeking help from the Auckland City Mission more than any other group. Missioner Chris Farrelly says there's been a big jump in the number of requests for food parcels, and one group in particular is coming forward.
Most of our people coming to us are mothers, frequently single mums who just have nowhere else to go to actually put the food on the table. Food is discretionary after you pay your power bill, expenses for kids, the loan bills, etc., etc. So often it's these mums who are experiencing the hardships.
Of the 11,000 people who lost their jobs in the quarter to June, 90% were women. A report on the ministerial expenditure of former Cabinet Minister Ian Lees-Galloway has found no evidence of inappropriate transactions or spending. The Palmerston North MP was stripped of his portfolios for having an affair with a former staffer and is not seeking re-election next month. Ministerial Services did a line-by-line review of all his expenditure, including staff and spouse expenses, from January last year to the end of June this year. The National Party is asking why 4 people in Australia have been granted border exemptions to work on a horse racing track. The all-weather track in Waikato is being funded with $7 million from the Provincial Growth Fund. National's Regional Development spokesperson Michael Woodhouse is questioning why it's a priority at this time.
There are very many thousands of well-meaning applications from loved ones, partners and other essential skills workers that are simply not even being considered. So why these 3 workers came through when others were being blocked is a very important question that needs to be answered by the government.
The spokesperson for the Immigration Minister says the workers have unique skills not found in New Zealand. The Victorian Premier Danielle Andrews has cautiously welcomed a continuing fall in the number of new coronavirus cases in the state. The ABC's Melissa Brown reports.
Victoria has experienced its deadliest day of the coronavirus pandemic, recording 19 deaths over the past 24 hours. 14 of those are linked to aged care. But case numbers are down to 322. They've continued to fall since reaching 725 last Wednesday. The Premier, Danielle Andrews, says it appears cases are stabilising, but the state still has a long way to go.
Melissa Brown reporting. The High Court jury in the trial of a former Auckland school teacher accused of abusing boys has gone home for the day and will resume deliberating tomorrow morning. Benjamin Swan has pleaded not guilty to 10 charges of doing an indecent act on a young person. The jury retired to consider its verdict at midday. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. Chasing her first LPGA Tour title in 2 years, New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko had a final round meltdown at the Marathon Classic in Ohio today and finished tied for second. With 6 holes to play, she squandered a 5-shot lead by posting 2 bogeys and a double bogey. The tournament was won by American world number 2 Danielle Kang, a good friend of Ko's, who says she feels for her.
There are really no words, to be honest. As a competitor, as a friend, I mean, she'll bounce back, and she's a great player, and she's proven to be one of the best players in the world. And yeah, I'm excited to see what she's going to bring to the table for the rest of the year.
Meanwhile, 23-year-old American Colin Morikawa has won the PGA Championship in San Francisco, his first major title. The top two sides in netball's ANZ Premiership square off in Wellington tonight, but only the Central Pulse are guaranteed a grand finals berth. The Tactics boosted their chances of a top two finish by beating the third-placed Northern Mystics 43-42 in Auckland yesterday, but must back up in Wellington tonight. The Pulse have won all but one of their 12 games, while the Tactics have won just 8 of their 13. But the last time the two sides met, the Pulse only got home by a goal. The Italian football giants Lazio are reportedly interested in signing All Whites and Burnley striker Chris Wood, who has had his most prolific season in the English Premiership this season, scoring 14 goals. That's the news.
Labor launches its COVID campaign.
I think it's inevitable that if you have the most significant economic and health crisis facing a country in 100 years, that rightly it is one of the things you're going to be debating.
Politically, it suits Labor, of course, to focus on COVID. It's very politically helpful for them.
Right now, we have a race that nobody could have anticipated. It's anybody's game, and we are putting everything behind taking it.
Election season. Morning report. Weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Cloudy periods today with isolated showers. Rain developing in the far north tonight, then spreading south tomorrow, heavy at times. For Taranaki and Taumaranui to Manawatu, including Taihape. Partly cloudy, isolated showers clearing tonight. Rain spreading from the north tomorrow night. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay expect fine weather today, high cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing tomorrow night. For Kapiti, Wellington and Wairarapa, also Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine weather, a few cloudy periods tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, a few showers today, fine spells tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, scattered showers for Fiordland and the south coast, long fine spells elsewhere. And Chatham Islands, fine spells, the odd shower possible. RNZ National, coming up to 7 minutes past 5. Thanks, Susanna, and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Coming up on the program, Judith Collins officially backs blue, pink and yellow for Epsom, urging national voters to back David Seymour. And a report into sacked Labour Minister Ian Lees-Galloway's spending finds no evidence of inappropriate transactions. But we begin tonight 3,000 kilometres away in Rarotonga, where Kiwis may soon be able to fly. But don't book your tickets just yet. The Prime Minister today signalled Kiwis may soon be able to holiday in the Cook Islands with a travel bubble likely to be in place before the end of the year. We'll go there shortly, but first here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Forget the global pandemic.
Kia ora, from our little paradise where everyone is welcome like family.
The Cook Islands wants you there now. The tourism-dependent country is hurting with the usual stream of spendthrift visitors all but gone. Resorts have been calling out for a lifeline. They desperately want a travel bubble with New Zealand, and they want it yesterday.
There just doesn't seem to be any real reasons why the borders should remain closed.
Leanna Scott manages the Muri Beach Club Hotel in Rarotonga and runs the Cook Islands Tourism Industry Committee. She says many businesses are worried they'll have to close their doors with the country's wage subsidy due to run out at the end of September.
We are COVID-free. We acted just as quickly as New Zealand acted for the very reason to have this ability to have a bubble.
Today, the slightest glimmer of hope for those businesses, at last an indication of when a bubble could be in place, though it's hardly the firm date they were after.
Our expectation is that it would be in place before the end of the year.
Before the end of the year, the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern laying out the roadmap this afternoon after meeting with her cabinet. She says a draft agreement is almost complete. Within 10 days, officials will be on the ground in the Cook Islands to check that the processes are in place. Within a fortnight, she'll report back with an updated timeline.
It is not a simple exercise, and it is one where we are exercising that caution. The last thing anyone wants is to reopen travel only to have it closed down because it hasn't been done properly.
For Leanna Scott, the news is bittersweet. Yes, some small progress, but she says it's not enough.
Yet another delay does still carry anxiety for businesses here in the island.
The same too from the Pacific Health leader, Dr. Colin Tukiotonga from the University of Auckland.
Not a lot new, I guess. I suppose people are wondering why the delay, given the risks. There's no COVID here, there's no COVID in the cooks.
I have no doubt that there'll be those who will want very fast movement on these travel arrangements, but I feel a duty of responsibility on both sides to make sure that whatever we do, that we make sure it lasts and that it's safe.
The arrangement would allow citizens of both countries to travel back and forth freely. Travellers would undergo health checks at the borders. Non-citizens would have to meet the usual visa requirements. Other Pacific islands have been eyeing a bubble too. Just yesterday, Fiji's Prime Minister congratulated New Zealand on Twitter for reaching 100 days without COVID-19 transmission. But Ms Ardern says other bubbles right now are not on her agenda.
In such a fragile global environment, quarantine-free travel with others at this stage is not a current reality.
Of course, this all takes place in the middle of an election campaign, the timing of today's announcement raising eyebrows in the opposition. National's Judith Collins, unimpressed.
This is not really the time for big government announcements. This is an election campaign, and when they're talking about having an announcement for something to happen in December, it's a bit, a bit cheeky, I would have thought.
The election is just under 6 weeks away. The Prime Minister will give another update on the Cook Islands bubble in about a fortnight. The promise of a Pacific holiday, a potentially nice election sweetener, though not something Ms Ardern is lining up for herself post the campaign.
I have no plans at this stage to do anything except campaign my heart out for the next 6 weeks, and I haven't thought anything beyond that.
From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Fletcher Melvin is the head of the Cook Islands Chamber of Commerce and the Private Sector Task Force. He's been pushing for a travel bubble and joins me now. Good evening, Fletcher. End of the year, potentially. Is that soon enough for you?
Kia ora. Well, it depends on what they mean by end of the year. If they're talking about October, then it's late, but it's something they would accept. We were hoping for September. Now, if they're talking about December, that would be very catastrophic for our businesses here. There are already businesses that are under a lot of stress. So we would hope that sooner rather than later.
When you say catastrophic, can you spell out for me what's going on with the industry there at the moment?
Yes, we're lucky in that the government here has been subsidising wages, so it allows for people to retain their staff. However, that is earmarked to end of September, which means that by the start of September, people will start to have their layoff notices. They need a month to prepare. There's a lot of repatriation plans going on, and it was hoped that if the travel bubble would have been established by early October, late September, at the latest, those plans could be put on hold and people could start to be a bit optimistic. But the fact is that people are just holding on financially. There is no income, literally for 5 months for most tourism businesses here, or all tourism businesses, I could probably say. After, to extend that out with no subsidies would be impossible for most businesses.
Fletcher, what are you hearing about what issues still need to be ironed out here? What are the remaining challenges?
Well, our health department itself is very confident that they have all the protocols in place. There are still plans taking place on the border side, airport to airport. I believe the New Zealand, the Auckland airport has said they'll be ready by the 17th. The Cook Islands airport, it's a very small airport. It won't take very much to get ourselves ready, and they feel that they are. We've put in place contact tracing app and protocols. It's a very small country. For us to turn around and get things ready, it's very easy for us. I would think that New Zealand would just let us know what they need and put in place, and the country would very quickly do that. And I believe that's what they're doing now.
Do you anticipate that there will be test runs of any nature?
Well, I'm sure there is. I mean, they will probably. The indication was that a team from New Zealand was coming over to do an audit about just in regard to our readiness. Our health head of health is confident that they have everything in place. So that's fine. Come over and do an audit. We said that we're ready, and we're confident. And the sooner the better. I mean, don't forget there's only one flight a week. So the team that's supposedly coming from New Zealand, if they come, they only have one Friday, this Friday, and then the following Friday to get over here, and then another week before they can leave again. Unless, of course, they're flying in in New Zealand a special flight. We're just hoping that the sooner they get this done, the better.
Well, interestingly, on Air New Zealand's website, there is, we can see flights from the 25th of October every day, although they're not confirming if indeed their confidence is because of something that they've heard. I'm wondering, what kind of capacity can you cope with? If you are the only place that New Zealanders can go if they're able to leave the country, I mean, how many of us can you manage?
Well, we can manage 3,000 at any one time. So at our peak, we were getting about 24 to up to 26 flights. It really, the most flights we had was 26 flights a week. We believe there's enough capacity for 17 flights a week from Air New Zealand, and that is how popular the destination is. A lot of people are looking forward to coming over, and and as soon as people found out that there's a possibility of it happening, Air New Zealand said that they were inundated with booking, so we don't have a problem with taking as many people as that can safely come over, and that's the key word, is that we're keen to have a safe corridor. We believe that New Zealand's safe, and we are certainly safe. We're a COVID-free country, so New Zealand, once everything's in place over there, we're ready.
So when you say a maximum capacity of 3,000 at any one time, is there any way or opportunity to expand that capacity?
Yes, I mean, sure, there's a lot of holiday homes that people have built, and that's one of the issues that we've had, is the last couple of years there's been such a boom in the tourism industry that a lot of Cook Islanders have invested into holiday homes and have just built them, so they are desperate to pay off mortgages and get people into these holiday homes. So yes, there's more than enough capacity here to deal with New Zealanders coming over. It's not a problem.
So if it doesn't get underway until closer to Christmas or near the end of the year, that's your hurricane season, isn't it?
It's hurricane season. It's not generally when Kiwis travel. It's middle of summer. It's starting it's about right in the middle of summer for New Zealand. So people are not planning to travel at those times. So we need them in October when school holidays are on. It's a little bit cooler over here for New Zealanders anyway. So October is a sweet spot for us.
So what are you trying to do to move it along then, to get October on the calendar?
Well, the New Zealand government hold all the cards. We are ready. We've done everything possible. If there's anything else that's required, we certainly would like to know, and the private sector here is keen to find out what they are, and that we will put in place whatever is required. I believe the government officials are working with New Zealand, that they are confident as well. Whatever it is, I mean, the main thing is that we need to know what New Zealand requires, and we will implement it. So that's what we're waiting on.
So, Fletcher, as you understand it, this is, what we'd call an exclusive relationship. If you invite us into your bubble, you can't go with anyone else?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that is a requirement of the Cooks as well. We've always said that we don't want to open to anywhere else that has COVID, and that's why we feel secure. I think if New Zealand opened up to countries that had COVID, we would have issues. But right now, it's a perfect scenario. The bubble should be established. We're both COVID-free, and we'll get this done.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That's Fletcher Melvin, who's the head of the Cook Islands Chamber of Commerce and the private sector task force there that's pushing really for a travel bubble. And as you heard him say, he'd rather it was October and not the end of the year. They need it soon. A new report into disgraced former Minister Ian Lees-Galloway's ministerial expenditure has found no evidence of inappropriate spending. Mr Lees-Galloway was stripped of his ACC immigration and workplace relations and safety portfolios last month for having an affair with a former staffer. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, commissioned a report to make sure taxpayer funds weren't inappropriately used during the course of his relationship. The report was released a short time ago. And with more on this, we are joined by our political reporter, Charlie Drever. Hi, Charlie. What did Ministerial Services investigate specifically here?
Good evening, Lisa. Well, Ministerial Services conducted a line-by-line review of all of his expenditure. Now, that includes staff and spouse expenditure and transactions, all the way back from January last year through to June this year. That also included domestic and international travel, which included a trip that the Minister took to Paris earlier this year. And they looked at the likes of things as even meals for ministerial staff.
So what exactly did they find?
Well, they found that all of the expenditure and transaction was consistent with the relevant legislation and policies around spending public funds. And off the back of that, because they didn't find any inappropriate spending, they've put out a recommendation that no further review is needed.
Charlie, do we know whether this woman was with him on any of these trips and on that international trip in particular to Paris?
Well, that Paris trip is subject to an OIA at the moment. They did mention a staff member going with him on the Paris trip. So you can make your own conclusions from that, but that was one trip in particular that they did pay close attention to.
OK, so how has the Prime Minister responded to the findings?
Well, the Prime Minister, as you mentioned before, was the one who actually commissioned this report in the first place to make sure that there was no inappropriate spending going on during the course of that relationship. She put out a brief statement this evening, basically saying that because of the findings of the review and because of the fact that Ian Lees-Galloway has departed from Parliament and he won't be seeking re-election this year, that she now considers the matter closed. And I'm thinking, and I think hoping as well, that this won't provide a further distraction for the election campaign.
Thanks, Charlie. That's Charlie Drever, our political reporter there, joining us live from our gallery studio. It is 22 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. What do you make of this Cook Islands travel bubble? The Prime Minister is saying probably get it off the ground by the end of the year. The Cook Islands are hoping for something more around October. Also, let us know what you think of that report into Ian Lees-Galloway's ministerial spending. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or flick us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Deal or no deal? Well, it's only a deal if you're the incumbent in Epsom, it seems. National leader Judith Collins today rolling out the red carpet for ACT leader David Seymour. It comes after Labour leader Jacinda Ardern ruled out deals for New Zealand First MP Shane Jones in Northland and Green MP Chloe Swarbrick in Auckland Central. The ACT party itself hit the road, firing up a bus with a knitted mascot called Freedom buckled into the front seat to take its campaign out of Epsom and into the provinces. David Seymour has been the party's lone MP since 2014, winning the Epsom seat, but failing to get enough of the party vote to bring anyone else into Parliament. But ACT's fortunes may be changing with or without National's endorsement. Our reporter Sarah Robson went along for the ride.
Decked out in its signature blue, pink and yellow colours, the ACT Party's campaign bus is ready to hit the road.
It's got David and my face plastered on one side and number 3 to number 8 on the other side. I think it's a 16-seater bus, but we've got 2 volunteer drivers who are absolute champions giving up their time to come and spend the next 5 weeks with us.
There'll be more than 70 stops along the way from Whangarei to Bluff. And while there's Wi-Fi, ACT's Deputy Leader Brooke Van Velden says the facilities on board this minibus are pretty basic.
There's not much. I've been very adamant that we needed a kettle because I drink lots of tea. So my concern was making sure that if we're on the road, that I actually get my morning tea in.
Recent polls have put support for ACT anywhere between 3 and 5%, giving it up to 6 MPs. And after 2 terms as the party's sole MP, leader David Seymour could have a caucus to keep in line. He says he's up to the task.
The Parliamentary Service recently asked me to write some advice for incoming MPs because they think I'm one of the best employers of parliamentary staff. So I think we're very prepared to lead a team, and it's going to be helped by the quality of the team that we're bringing in.
Deputy Brooke Van Velden played an instrumental role in getting David Seymour's end-of-life choice bill across the line in Parliament, which voters will get the final say on in a referendum on election day. Gun lobbyist Nicole McKee, a vocal opponent of the coalition government's changes to firearms laws in response to the Christchurch mosque shootings, is number 3 on ACT's list. Mr Seymour was the only MP to vote against the first tranche of those reforms. But does ACT risk getting captured by special interest groups? Mr Seymour doesn't think so.
We've never taken a position that you can't draw a straight line back to pure principle, whether it be free speech, fair firearm laws, our constructive and consistent approach to the Epidemic Response Committee, end-of-life choice, partnership schools. With ACT, it's always been about principle, sometimes to our political cost.
But the former United Future leader, Peter Dunn, knows better than most how hard it can be to keep a caucus of divergent interests together. He says there is a risk ACT could follow the same fate as United Future in the mid-2000s, when it ended up split between a conservative Christian faction and its more moderate centrist supporters.
The important thing is to try and get the team together and focused on the team's objectives rather than the special interests or the pet projects of individuals' objectives. If you get caught by the latter, you're in trouble. In David's case, I think he's really got to say, look, this is what ACT's about. These are our core messages. We've got to fit all of our approaches into those core messages. Otherwise, it could fly apart very quickly.
ACT has long relied on the super-urban Epsom electorate to secure its seat in Parliament and an endorsement from National. And like her predecessors, Judith Collins is singing David Seymour's praises.
I'm very happy to say that we want the party vote, please, in Epsom, please. And in this particular electorate, you can give the first tick for the electorate to David Seymour. I think he's a very good local MP, and I would welcome him being part of a national ACT government.
As for whether he needs an endorsement from National in a seat where polling shows him well ahead,
It would be churlish for me to turn off any endorsement, so I'm always grateful for people encouraging others to vote for me.
David Seymour doesn't think he'll need to change his pitch to voters too much when he hits the provinces.
Voters in Epsom and voters everywhere have the same basic concern. How do we secure our future economically without indebting future generations?
And with a smile and a wave,
Bon voyage,
and a knitted mascot doll named Freedom buckled up in the front seat, the ACT Party bus is ready for the road.
Freedom has 2 eyes for seeing, a nose for smelling, but evidently no ears, which possibly is a disadvantage for Freedom because, of course, ACT is always listening.
And in case you're wondering, it's first in, first served for a seat on the ACT Roadshow. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Workers have been given exemptions to come to New Zealand to work on an all-weather horse racing track in Cambridge, raising questions from the opposition about government priorities during the pandemic. A synthetic all-weather racetrack pushed by New Zealand First and funded through the Provincial Growth Fund is under construction in Cambridge in the Waikato. 4 workers from Australia have been granted exemptions to border restrictions to work on the track. But National is asking why priority has been given to them over thousands of others. RNZ's Guyon Espiner has the story.
Nearly $7 million from the Provincial Growth Fund has been spent on building a synthetic racing track in Cambridge to allow horse racing in all weather. Australian company Martin Collins is working on the project. They're specialists in laying synthetic racetracks. Cambridge Jockey Club CEO Mark Fraser-Campen says it was close to completion when the COVID-19 pandemic struck.
Unfortunately, the guys were here to mix it pre-lockdown and then had to go back to Australia. This is like 3 days before lockdown. So they went back and they've just had a bit of a struggle to get back in. But we've now got an exemption to come over, which got approved this week.
A spokesman for Immigration Minister Chris Farfoy confirmed 4 people from Martin Collins were given border exemptions as they were assessed as being critical workers, having unique skills not found in New Zealand.
Basically, it's 2 mixing crew that actually mix the product and then 2 guys to lay it. So we applied for the 4, but it looks like probably 3 of them will come.
But National's regional development spokesman Michael Woodhouse is questioning why a synthetic horse racing track should be a priority for border exemptions.
There are very many thousands of well-meaning applications from loved ones, partners and other essential skills workers that are simply not even being considered. So why these 3 workers came through when others were being blocked is a very important question that needs to be answered by the government.
New Zealand Initiative think tank chairman Roger Partridge said last week that businesses were finding border exemptions hard to come by.
We surveyed our members over the last week, and they're a majority of the largest companies in New Zealand. And what we found that border exemptions are as scarce as a winning lottery ticket, and whether or not they get one seems to be a matter of chance.
Cabinet guidelines say short-term workers coming in for fewer than 6 months must have unique experience not found in New Zealand. Roger Partridge says many businesses are struggling to get skilled workers into the country under the current rules.
We heard stories of major plant commissioning having to be deferred, of senior executives and their families being marooned overseas after resigning from their jobs to take up leadership positions in New Zealand.
But the workers on the Cambridge all-weather racetrack made the cut. A spokesman for Immigration Minister Chris Farfoy said the decision was made by Immigration New Zealand officials without input or advocacy from any politicians. It's one of 3 all-weather tracks funded by the government. The tracks have been championed by New Zealand First and funded using close to $30 million of taxpayer money from the Provincial Growth Fund. Officials from the Provincial Development Unit recommended declining funding for the 3 tracks when a bid was first made in 2018 by the New Zealand Racing Board and New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing. Officials said the projects didn't meet the PGF criteria. They had doubts the projects would create permanent jobs and said that a track in Riccarton was not eligible for Provincial Growth Fund money because it was in Christchurch City. The 3 tracks were all eventually funded from a part of the PGF called the Manifesto Commitments to the Regions, a fund set aside for projects in the coalition agreement. About $45 million has been spent on 7 projects sourced from this section of the fund, which was criticised last week by the Auditor-General for not being transparent and operating as a fund within a fund. But the politics of all this are of little interest to the Cambridge Jockey Club. Mark Fraser-Campen says he's looking forward to having the project completed now that the specialist Australian workers have been given exemptions to come over and finish the job.
It's going to make a huge difference to Cambridge. I think the statistics in Australia are fantastic, and it's definitely the way of the future.
The Minister in charge of the Provincial Growth Fund, Shane Jones from New Zealand First, declined an interview with RNZ about the funding of the all-weather racetracks. He said in a statement that he and the 3 Labour Party ministers who also signed off on the racetracks stood by the decisions. Shane Jones said wet weather meant about 40 race meetings were postponed each year, and the synthetic tracks would support the $1.6 billion racing industry, which provided about 15,000 full-time jobs. For Checkpoint, ko Gaian Espanatene.
And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Nationals poised to pick its contender for the trophy seat of Auckland Central. Australia has its deadliest day of the pandemic so far, for another 19 coronavirus deaths in Victoria overnight after 17 yesterday. And the Blues clean up their boots for children in need. Now, we would love to hear from you. I'm interested to know what you think about Electorate deals. Also, border exemptions for those people to come in and work on the all-weather horse racing track in Cambridge. What do you make of that? And are you packing your bags for a Christmas holiday in the Cook Islands? Let us know your thoughts. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now for the headlines with Susanna.
The National Party leader is criticising the government's timing of a travel bubble with the Cook Islands. The Prime Minister expects the bubble to be in place by the end of the year, saying officials will be in the Cooks within 10 days to check the processes. But Judith Collins says the government needs to explain why it will take until the end of the year to open the bubble. Meanwhile, the head of the Cook Islands Chamber of Commerce, Fletcher told Checkpoint the Cooks just needs New Zealand to say what is needed to make the bubble happen, and they'll do it. Australia's Deputy Chief Medical Officer says the numbers of new COVID-19 cases being recorded in Victoria appear to be plateauing, but the state has set a record for deaths. 19 people with the virus have died in the past 24 hours, while there have been 322 new cases. However, infections have steadily decreased since last Wednesday's record tally of 725. The Auckland City Mission is dealing with a big jump in requests for food parcels recently, saying the biggest group now looking for help is sole mothers, many of whom have lost their jobs because of the pandemic. The mission is now giving out 1,000 food parcels a week, a 175% increase on the same time last year. It says the demand is extraordinary. A report on the ministerial expenditure of former Cabinet Minister Ian Lees-Galloway has found no evidence of inappropriate spending. The Palmerston North MP was stripped of his portfolios for having an affair with a former staff member and is not seeking re-election next month. The Wellington City Council is looking at shaking up the design of Courtenay Place to deter brawls. 9 people were arrested last weekend after a mass brawl which left one person seriously injured. The police say they're having to deal with similar levels of violence almost every weekend. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. If you are just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's time now for the business news with Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas, second largest energy company, Contact. So it's posted, a significant loss in its full year result. What's the significant loss?
Yeah, so look, their full year profit has fallen by nearly 2/3 on a year ago. And it's posted a profit of $125 million compared with about $345 million a year before. But look, that profit last year was boosted, really pumped up by a significant one-off asset sale. So maybe you've got to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. And the company's saying that this year's struggles were due to volatility in the wholesale electricity market, the rising cost of thermal generation, and also the pandemic. So you've got quite a number of things coming together there. But the company says that given all this, look, it was a pretty solid result. But I do think it's quite interesting to look forward and look ahead with what some of the noise that Contact is making. And one is obviously the imminent closure or just the uncertainty about what's going to happen with Tiwai. Look, they're saying that no decision has been made about what's going to happen or when it's going to be closed down, the aluminium smelter, but Contact says the whole country would be a lot better served if the smelter did remain operational for another 5 years. And they said it's not just important for Southland's economy, but they also pointed to the impact it would have on global emissions. Because remember, Tiwai is often talked up about that it's one of the cleanest producers, cleanest aluminium smelters, and they say, look, if this place is shut down, or when it is shut down, there's going to be a void left there, and it's going to have to be filled, and it's probably going to be filled by one of these other companies or other smelters that aren't as green as Tiwai.
So why is 5 years the sweet spot then? If they're saying it should have at least 5 years more life, not closed down for at least 5 years, have they given a reason for the time frame?
Not necessarily, but I think if we could maybe speculate that, if we think it's Southland's economy, it's giving that economy time to maybe prepare, but also with Tiwai that aluminium smelter does use a significant amount of power. And if it is shut down, it's not as easy just to transfer that power to retail power users like you and I. There has to be some wholesale demand. And that's actually one thing that Contact did mention in this, that the wholesale demand for electricity is actually quite flat at the moment. So look, while we might hope that if Tiwai is shut down, that there may be a prospect that all this electricity, this abundance of supply may be transferred to us and we may save on our monthly electricity bills, the reality is that probably won't be the case. Like the way that the market is set up, that while our prices are determined in part by the wholesale market, a lot of it is smoothed over time, so we wouldn't really see too much of a change. And I guess with we are in the thick of the reporting season now, we're going to see a lot more results from a whole range of companies, but other electricity companies. It'll be interesting to see that if there results follow a similar sort of pattern as what we've seen today here with Contact.
Okay. Post-lockdown rebound, or what some economists call the sugar rush, that activity appears to have run its course. So is that what businesses are saying, or what are they saying?
So this is the findings from ANZ's preliminary survey of business confidence. And they usually do like a main survey of business confidence at the end of the month, but they like to do this one in the first week of a month to sort of give us a bit of a taste, a flavour, so to say, of what's maybe going on. And as we came out of lockdown, all these indicators that ANZ surveys businesses on, across all of the surveys they did, they were all jumping up. Survey after survey. Well, we're now seeing our first sort of significant step backwards. But this was already kind of hinted at with the previous survey we've looked at. But what we've seen is that businesses' confidence about the economic outlook, that's down by 10 points. Businesses' outlook about their own future, down by 8 points. Their intentions to hire more people. Across the board, all these indicators have gone down, and it sort of led to what ANZ was maybe saying, maybe the last time I spoke about the survey, was that, look, that rebound was seen coming out of lockdown, it has begun to run out of steam, or maybe it has in fact already run out of steam. So I spoke to ANZ's chief economist. They said, look, this was going to happen. They said this economic crisis was going to have 3 prongs, or 3 major stages. And that would be the lockdown, that's going to be a significant impact, the closed borders, the impact that's going to have on tourism and international students, and also the global slowdown of global exports. So, look, ANZ said today, the beginning is now over. We're now going to start to see some maybe real indications of what sort of impact this pandemic is going to have on our economy going forward.
Okay, what else has been going on the markets today?
Yeah, well, the NZX Top 50 is up by about 1/3%, by 37 points to 11,683. The New Zealand dollar is at 66 US cents, 92.2 Australian, and 50.5 British pence. And my beloved gold is actually down $30 since the last time we spoke. And it's fallen down to $2,028 an ounce. So maybe we're seeing the first signs of a correction there. Who knows? But we'll keep an eye on that going forward throughout the rest of the week.
Okay, we look forward to the next gold report. That's Nicholas Poynton with our business news there. Let's head overseas now. And Australia's had its deadliest day of the pandemic so far, after 19 coronavirus deaths have been recorded in Victoria. The state recorded 322 new cases today, another drop from the peak daily numbers above 700. Victoria Premier Danielle Andrews says the downward trend is encouraging, but it's too early to see the results of stricter lockdown rules.
We have 1 day's data. It's always better to be lower than it was the previous day, but it is only 1 day's data, and the stage 4 changes, many of which only came into effect at midnight last night, a number of others which came into effect midnight Wednesday last week. The oldest of these being the curfew that had been in place for 1 week yesterday, as of 8 p.m. yesterday. So it is still very early for us to be trying to measure the impacts of stage 4, but we're certainly seeing perhaps some greater stability that is a result of the cumulative impact of stage 3.
Victoria is rolling out a series of ads to warn people about the effects of COVID-19. The public service announcements share stories from those who've survived the virus but are now suffering from ongoing health problems. The Premier says it's a reminder to take the risk of COVID more seriously.
All Victorians should be in no doubt that this is a matter of life and death, and even for those who are able to survive this virus, there are lingering consequences, there are lingering impacts for many. That's not every patient, but it is enough and it is random enough that should be a timely reminder that we are all in this together. It does not discriminate, it doesn't stop, it is wicked, and it'll only be defeated if we are united, if we are determined, and if we see this thing through.
The state is also making testing easier for those who aren't able to reach a testing station. It's launching a call to test program which aims to test people in their homes within 48 hours. Victorian Health Minister Jenny Mikakos says it's another way to get more people tested.
So this is designed to ensure that approximately 200 vulnerable Victorians every day will have access to this new testing capacity, making sure that people who might have limited mobility due to disability or might have other vulnerabilities due to chronic health conditions can get testing in their own home.
More than 300 people have now died from the coronavirus in Australia. The vast majority, 228, have been in Victoria. Train drivers are pleading with the public to be more careful at railway lines to prevent near misses and deaths. Since 2013, 110 pedestrians and motorists have been killed in collisions with trains, and Kiwi Rail estimates there's roughly one near miss every day. Jonathan Mitchell reports, and a gentle warning, if you are watching these pictures, they may be a little upsetting.
The hum and buzz of Monday morning at Wellington Railway Station. There I meet Will Campbell. He's got 30 years experience in rail, 20 of them as a driver. He's seen a lot in that time, including a collision which killed a man about 8 years ago. He reckons he's involved with about one near miss every fortnight.
Yeah, the hot spots seem to be around from the Ipuni area up to the Pomari area, and I'll share a little story with you. One time is that a few years back I saw a family with about half a dozen adults and about half a dozen kids in tow pushing a pram down the track. You know, it's just dealing with things like that. Like I said, I've been driving for about 20 years, 30 years on rail, and nothing surprises me.
He's become more vigilant and aware as a result.
When you're driving your train, when you're stopping at a station and you let your passengers off, you actually become, as a driver, you become a very good reader of body language. So you're always watching what people are doing. And any change in behaviour, you're really watching like a hawk.
Fletcher Goldsworthy's the face of a new video campaign to launch Rail Safety Week. He's been a driver for more than 4 years and has had plenty of close calls in that time, including a woman crossing the tracks with a baby in a pram.
You've got this knot of nervousness in your chest and you're just waiting to see what happens. But, you know, afterwards you go through all those emotions as if you hit it, like you do all the what ifs, you know.
Kiwi Rail Chief Executive Greg Miller says it has support services in place to help drivers such as Will and Fletcher when they have a near miss or death. He says the public needs to wake up and be alert because it can't protect every kilometre of track around the country.
A fully laden 1,000-tonne freight train can slide for a kilometre as soon as they lock it up the brakes. So it's a very difficult thing to do, to stop instantly when you see a car, a truck or a person cross the track.
In the past 2 years, 23 high-risk pedestrian crossings in Auckland have had barrier gates installed. 15 more are planned, with 12 upgrades in Wellington and at least 27 road crossing improvements on the cards in Wairarapa. The Transport Minister Phil Twyford says that's just a preventive measure.
The investments that we're making upgrading safety improvements at rail crossings are making a difference, but we need people to be vigilant as well. We need people to be really alert, to follow the rules, look for the signage and pay attention. Otherwise, we won't be able to reduce the terrible death toll.
Fletcher Goldsworthy's got an important but simple plea.
When people are approaching, pedestrian crossings, level crossings, they need to look at the signs and the bells and the whistles and everything and just expect a train. The bells and whistles are there for a reason.
For Checkpoint, call Jonathan Mitchell, TNA.
And if you were listening to Jonathan's piece on the radio, we'll put it up on our Facebook page. Man, there are some massively tight near misses. A real warning to keep your eyes and ears open. Police say Wellington's entertainment district is witnessing more and more episodes of serious violence. On Saturday, a mass brawl broke out on the corner of Courtney Place and Taranaki Street, leaving one person with serious injuries. Local businesses, police and a youth safety group say since the end of lockdown, there's been a big rise in the number of people out late in central Wellington, as well as a higher level of drunkenness. Harry Locke reports.
During the day, Courtney Place is an image of passing traffic, closed-up bars and a sprinkling of pedestrians. But come Friday and Saturday night, it's a very different picture. Throngs of people milling around the countless number of now open clubs, all banging out tune after tune. For the past 3 weeks, the party vibe has spilled over into a sour atmosphere, with sporadic fights breaking out in the area. Inspector Dion Bennett is the acting area commander for Wellington.
We've noticed an increase in serious violence. The levels of intoxication of people is contributing to that. We're seeing people make poor decisions, poor self-management and negative attitudes.
The most recent incident, a brawl at 3:30 on Saturday morning on the corner of Courtney Place and Taranaki Street, where 9 were arrested and 1 person left with serious injuries after an apparent stabbing. There were a number of other reports of fights within the same block on the same night. Inspector Bennett says they have noticed a significant uptick in the number of people out on the weekend, and he's not the only one. Chanda Sok owns J&M Fast Food, which does a roaring trade in the early hours of the morning. She says she's clocked a rise in the number of people who are out.
Since lockdown until now, it's a lot of people. It's not compared the past, no, not the same. Not a lot of people in the town.
Loads more?
Yeah, like 30% increase, even ourselves too.
What might be driving the fight, she says, is the mass exodus of people from the bars at closing time.
The worst one in the morning, around 2 to 4, that's time to the pub close down. Yeah, that always happen.
So
yeah.
when all the clubs close out?
Yes, and people just come in one place and then start talking and then start fight, that's it.
Inspector Bennett says it's a perfect storm of factors which might be fueling the violence.
The volume of people increasing does contribute to the number of fights that break out because we have people in confined spaces. Tolerance levels are low, decision making is poor, and attitudes are often aggressive.
Community manager for Wellington City Council, Jenny Rains, says they're currently collecting data to find out the steps they can take to reduce the level of violence. While she's looking at some immediate steps, working with the bar's security and police, they're also considering shaking up the layout of the street.
We are looking very closely both at Chero Park and Courtney Place about design and the effect of the design on people. It's about actually how the spaces are used, so it might be at certain times you look at more pedestrian versus cars.
There's also suggestions levels of intoxication are higher at the moment than what they normally would be. Paul Retimanu is a trustee of the Vulnerable Support Charitable Trust, which is behind Take 10, a late-night safe zone for young people who need a safe place or a few minutes break from drinking. He says they're busier than usual. On a normal night, they get through 400 litres of water, but currently they're shipping out 600 litres.
We are seeing people, and the intoxication component is, talking to the team, there is a lot more intoxicated people coming through.
Inspector Bennett says for the coming weekend, they will look to assign the number of officers to the demand. The police are appealing to people to be better self-managed, to manage their alcohol intake, to rely on their friends, and to utilise services like Take 10. For Checkpoint, Harry Locke.
It is, we'll call it 8 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A move to make it easier to get tested for stomach cancer is expected to save the lives of whānau Māori, and in particular the several hundred Māori who are unaware they are at risk. New guidelines developed by the University of Otago and Kimi Hauora Research Clinic allow Māori to be tested for the genetic mutation CDH1, even if there is only one other family member with stomach cancer. And the whānau who've been devastated by the disease say the new testing will save hundreds of lives. Miriana Johnson reports.
Dr. Karen Paringatai knows firsthand what it is like to have the genetic mutation. At her auntie's insistence, she went and got tested 11 years ago. A year later, the senior lecturer at the University of Otago's School of Māori, Pacific and Indigenous Studies had her stomach removed after discovering she had the mutation. Her dad's auntie, a few of her children and grandchildren had all had the rare stomach cancer, something Dr. Paringatai only found out after her father died and she returned back to the East Coast for his kauemate. She wants more people to learn their whakapapa.
Because a lot of the urban Māori today have, for a number of reasons, are disconnected with their whakapapa. So my hope is that they see this as a way of engaging with it, even if it's just to save their lives. Because without the knowledge of their whakapapa, without knowledge of my whakapapa, I probably would be dead right about now.
Dr Paringatai, who also helped develop the new guidelines, says they will empower whānau.
Just one case of gastric cancer or stomach cancer, or diffuse gastric cancer actually, is enough to warrant testing being done. So that's the main change, the main recommendation from these guidelines that will impact Māori significantly.
Mabel McLeod from Tauranga used to attend at least one tangi a year for a whānau member who died from the rare stomach cancer, including her cousin who died when she was just 16. She estimates over 50 people in her whānau have died in the 4 decades from 1950. Many believe they had a mākutu or curse placed on them after selling their land, which was then used for quarrying purposes. But after becoming a nurse, Ms McLeod realised there was something more going on.
When I went nursing, I knew first cousins were dying all the time, but it was then I knew something serious. So I came home from Nelson. I was there for 13 years and just started it.
She raised it at a genetics conference, calling for more research to be done in the area. That led to Dr Perry Guilford discovering the genetic variant that was responsible for the stomach cancer. He says that while it isn't a common cancer, there are likely to be several hundred Māori with this gene who are at a high risk of both stomach and breast cancer. Dr Guilford says he's unsure why so many Māori have the genetic mutation, although he does have one theory in relation to how the mutation may have been advantageous in pre-European times.
The theory we have is that mutations in the gene may lead to some kind of decreased risk of infectious disease. So various pathogens such as viruses and bacteria may have found it more difficult to get into a cell with a CDH1 mutation.
Dr Guilford says it's essential that whakapapa is a part of the research for all genetic health problems for Māori. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Miriana Johnson tēnei.
To the US now, and the United States is now home to a quarter of the world's coronavirus cases, with the country surpassing 5 million infections and more than 160,000 deaths. President Trump has signed 4 executive orders to provide economic relief to millions of Americans after Congress failed to reach a deal. Democrats have labelled the move weak and unconstitutional, while some legal experts say it's likely to be challenged in the courts. The ABC's Catherine Diss reports.
As the nation clocked up 5 million coronavirus cases, Donald Trump took the unusual and controversial step of using his presidential powers to bypass Congress. Here's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on Fox News Sunday.
However it came about, and I know you don't like the executive action, won't millions of Americans now get some extended federal unemployment relief?
No. In fact, what the president did is, I agree with the Republican senator said, it was unconstitutional slop. While he says he's going to do the payroll tax, what he's doing is undermining Social Security and Medicare. So these are illusions. And
Donald Trump signed 4 executive orders, among them extending unemployment checks but at a lower rate, and ordered a payroll tax deferral until the end of the year. It comes after talks between Democrats and the White House collapsed on Friday, leaving tens of millions of Americans without economic relief. But the actions are being seen as challenging the boundaries of power that separate the White House and Capitol Hill.
You suggested that President Trump does not have the legal authority to do what he did yesterday. Are you talking about going to court?
The constitutionality of that is a different question. Right now, we need to come to agreement. We've got to meet halfway. We've got to do the best we can for the American people. But what they're putting forth does not meet that standard.
After initially saying the measures would require an act of Congress, the president's own chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, now says it's legal.
I'm not the lawyer, and I probably spoke out of turn there.
So you do think this is a real power, because there's a big question about whether he way overstepped his power.
I understand. There will be a debate. I'm not the lawyer, so I can't give you the final word.
The president's actions are likely to be challenged in court, casting doubt over how quickly the money would reach those who need it. What is clear, 30 million Americans now rely on unemployment aid, with no end in sight to the coronavirus pandemic.
Catherine Diss reporting. And a schoolboy from Northern Ireland has struck it lucky with a metal detector he got for his 10th birthday. He's found a sword thought to be 300 years old on the very first day he used it. The BBC's Julian Fowler reports.
Fintan Hughes from County Tyrone had been asking for a metal detector for some time, so his family decided to buy him one for his 10th birthday. He tried it out for the first time on land near his home, and it wasn't long before it found objects buried in the ground, as his father Paul explains.
The metal detector sounded a couple of times and we dug up a couple of different little trinkets. Fintan was doing the detecting and we were doing the digging for him. We went over and started to dig and we dug up. We didn't actually know what it was, to be honest.
Fintan said at first he didn't realise the significance of what he'd found.
I didn't really know what it was until my cousin Aaron washed it and then found out it was a sword. I was very excited, especially knowing I found it.
The discovery has been reported to the National Museum of Northern Ireland. Military experts believe it's an ornate basket hilt-type sword, once used by English officers in the 18th century. The Hughes family hopes it can be conserved and put on display in a museum, along with the story of its discovery. Fintan also wants to find out if it's worth a bit of money.
And let's get to some of your feedback now on a travel bubble with the cooks. This listener says, well, it would be counterproductive because all the recently ejected money in the economy will end up on the beaches of the Cook Islands. We have paid a huge price to achieve this envious position and the nation has a huge debt bill to pay. The propped up money should be spent domestically, which is where its benefits belong. No, says another person, we want Kiwis to stay in New Zealand, not go over to the Cook Islands. Our economy needs it.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with DNA. The decision to wait months before opening a Cook Islands travel bubble with New Zealand is being called catastrophic. The Prime Minister said today she expects the bubble to be opened before the end of the year, but the head of the Cook Islands Chamber of Commerce says the wage subsidy there winds up at the end of September. Fletcher Melvin told Checkpoint a travel bubble in late September or early October would allow people to feel a bit more optimistic.
People are just holding on financially. There is no income. Literally for 5 months for most tourism businesses here, all tourism businesses I could probably say. To extend that out with no subsidies would be impossible for most businesses.
Fletcher Melvin of the Cook Islands Chamber of Commerce. New Zealanders returning for a short trip will start being charged for their stay in managed isolation from tomorrow. Legislation setting up the regime passed in Parliament last week with near unanimous support, and the necessary regulations were approved by Cabinet today. The regime will apply to New Zealanders who go overseas for a holiday or business trip and those living overseas who are returning for fewer than 90 days. A single person will be charged $3,100 with $950 for each additional adult in a room. People will be able to apply for exemptions under compassionate or financial hardship grounds. A report on the ministerial expenditure of former Cabinet Minister Ian Lees-Galloway has found no evidence of inappropriate spending. Last month, Mr Lees-Galloway was stripped of his portfolios for having an affair with a former staffer, and he's not seeking re-election next month. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
Ministerial Services did a line-by-line review of all his expenditure, including staff and spouse expenses from January last year to the end of June this year. The Prime Minister says she commissioned the review to ensure taxpayer money was not inappropriately used in the course of his relationship, and the report has found none was. Jacinda Ardern says she now considers the matter closed. From Parliament, ko Charlie Drever, DNA.
Nationals leader Judith Collins has endorsed the ACT Party leader David Seymour for the Epsom seat. The party has historically supported ACT's candidacy in the electorate, but recent polls have National about 20% points behind Labour. Ms Collins says everybody knows she and Mr Seymour work well together.
I am very happy to say that we want the party vote please and Epsom please, and in this particular electorate you can give the first tick for the electorate to David Seymour. I think he's a very good local MP and I would welcome him being part of a national ACT government.
Judith Collins, National regularly puts forward a candidate for Epsom but encourages its supporters to vote for the ACT candidate. David Seymour has held the seat since 2014. A lawyer for the Ministry for Primary Industry says liability for a breach of the Marine Reserves Act extends beyond the skipper already charged. Daryl Saunders has been fined more than $15,000 for fishing in a marine reserve off Kaikoura last year. The Amaltal company, which is defending a similar charge, says it's a captain's responsibility to ensure fishing zones are accurately marked on charts. But it admitted at a hearing in Nelson today that at the time the reserve was not marked on the vessel's electronic plotter. Lawyer Julie Watton says it's inexplicable how a reserve added to nautical charts in 2016 was not marked on the vessel's electronic or paper charts.
In this case, the ignorance of the reserve was a result of insufficient steps being taken by the defendant to find out the facts. The defendant is culpable.
The judge has reserved her decision. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 6. The top two sides in netball's ANZ Premiership square off in Wellington tonight, but only the Central Pulse are guaranteed a grand finals berth. The Tactics boosted their chances of a top two finish by beating the third-placed Northern Mystics 43-42 in Auckland yesterday, but must back up in Wellington tonight. The Pulse have won all but one of their 12 games, while the Tactics have won just 8 of 13. But the last time the two sides met, the Pulse only got home by 1 goal. In Rugby League, Penrith coach Ivan Cleary could be in line for a fine of $20,000. The NRL has served him with a breach notice for his criticism of referees. Cleary claimed officials managed Canberra back into Saturday's match against the Panthers by officials after several second-half calls went in the Raiders' favour. The Panthers held on to win 28-12. Five-time world snooker champion Ronnie O'Sullivan has poured scorn on the game's next generation after advancing to a world championship quarter-final clash with fellow veteran Mark Williams. The 44-year-old, who often refers to lower-ranked players as numpties, says many of the younger players would struggle to be decent amateurs.
They're so bad that, a lot of them that you see now, you just think, I've probably got to lose an arm and a leg to sort of fall outside the top 50, do you know what I mean?
Ronnie O'Sullivan. And Christchurch will host next year's National Mountain Bike Champs in February. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Don Jesson on Automania, his new book on car collectors. Nick Bollinger samples new music from Jamaican Greek Londoner Leanne LaHavis, an unexpected step into post-rock by Taylor Swift, and a working man's memorial from Steve Earle. Mark Rogers presents Americana at its finest in Nashville, Babylon, and we head to Darwin to chat sport with the ABC's Shannon Byrne on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7. On RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Cloudy periods tonight, isolated showers included. Rain developing in the far north tonight, then spreading south tomorrow, heavy at times. Taranaki and Taumaranui to Manawatu, including Taihape. Partly cloudy, isolated showers clearing tonight, rain spreading from the north tomorrow night. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay fine tonight, high cloud increasing tomorrow, rain developing tomorrow night. Kapiti, Wellington and Wairarapa, also Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine weather, a few cloudy periods tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, a few showers tonight, fine spells tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, scattered showers for Fiordland and the south coast, along fine spells elsewhere. Chatham Islands, fine spells. The odd shower is possible. RNZ National. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The National Party is choosing its candidate for the Auckland Central Electorate tonight. The seat's been held by former National Deputy Leader Nikki Kaye, who announced that she wouldn't seek re-election in the wake of Todd Muller's resignation as party leader. National Party bosses admitted last week that they'd gone against their own party rules and that this has slowed down the process to get a candidate selected. Our reporter, Nita Blake-Person, is at Westhaven, where tonight's meeting is taking place. Nita, who is still in the running to be National's candidate in this electorate?
Well, we're down to 3 candidates tonight. There's Emma Mallow, Nuenthy Samaracone, and the third one we understand to be Rob Thomas, who's a former local board member. But it really does come down to Nuenthy and Emma, and that's because of what we understand transpired with the National Party last week. They put forward those two as their preferred candidates. However, it since came out that that actually wasn't what their rules dictated, that they needed to have 5 candidates. So they brought a few back into the mix. Rob Thomas was one of them. We understand another 2 of those have either pulled out or are not interested. So it does come down to these 3 candidates tonight.
Is there a particular front runner?
Well, it could go either way based on speaking to people who are heading into the meeting tonight. Just to give a bit of background about both of them, Emma Mallow is a consultant communications manager at the ANZ Bank, and she's got a background with the Young Nats and is said to have quite a bit of support within the electorate for going for this seat. Then you've got Nuenthy Samaracone, who's a Sri Lankan-born consultant who was already the party's candidate out in Manurewa, but she's understood to have quite a bit of backing within the party for this seat. So she has had a bit of controversy surrounding her bid. It basically comes from a photo of her which emerged and has been circulating on Facebook, and claims that that made her unfit for the role. It was a photo of her in a bodybuilding competition, and she's had to hire a QC to fight back, saying it's damaging and untrue to her campaign, but it's added to a pretty messy process for filling the Nat seat here.
Okay, so when we finally get to the last person standing in terms of the National Party candidate for the electorate, who else is in the competition? Who are they up against?
Well, whoever wins tonight comes down to 2 main front runners that they'll be going up against. You've got the Greens, Chloe Swarbrick, and Helen White for Labour. So Helen White's an employment lawyer. She went for this seat last time and missed out. She's currently 50th on the Labour list. And then there's Chloe Swarbrick, who's a Green Party list MP and is also a former mayoral candidate. So that's who they'll be vying for this seat with.
Okay, so it is, is it just another electorate, or is this seat more important?
Well, it's always been a hard fought for seat. As you say, Nikki Kay's had it for the past 12 years, but she has had to fight for it. 2 of those elections she went up against Labour's Jacinda Ardern and beat her only by a few hundred votes in both elections. And then Helen White came in 2017. Nikki Kay broadened her lead to about 1,500 votes for that election. But yeah, it's always come pretty close. It's an interesting electorate in its makeup. It's got inner city suburbs, you've got Ponsonby, Herne Bay and Freeman's Bay, but also the islands of the Hauraki Gulf. So you've got Waiheke and Great Barrier making up most of that. And in terms of its makeup, there's a lot of young people here. It's got more voters who are between 20 and 29 than any other electorate in the country. And based on its electoral profile, a lot of those people are really highly educated. It's often seen as quite a liberal seat, so there's been a lot of talk of maybe a deal being done here, Labour or the Greens pulling back a little bit to avoid splitting that left vote. But Jacinda Ardern, the Labour leader today, said that is absolutely not happening, that Labour doesn't do deals and it won't be starting now. And Chloe Swarbrick herself said she's not interested because she doesn't think she needs it. She's pretty sure she'll be elected without that.
So, no deal. So instead what? Some fierce competition, Nita?
Yeah, it's going to be a sprint for whoever wins tonight. The electoral debates have already started. Auckland Central had their one last night, and obviously National didn't have a person to put up, so they had Erica Stanford fill in. But whoever does win this has such a short space of time to be winning votes. Obviously the election's only 40 days away, but advance voting actually starts on September 5th, so that's just over 4 weeks away. And advance voting is not a small amount of votes. 1.2 million advance votes cast last election. So whoever comes in tonight is in for a hotly contested race for this seat.
Thanks, Nita. That's Nita Blake-Person, who's in Westmere, where that meeting is going to take place tonight to decide who will be the national candidate in Auckland Central. And we're expecting that decision to come sometime after 7:30. So we'll keep you posted. The Met Service is warning Auckland's spring will be far drier than normal, exacerbating the water shortage for a city already in its worst drought in decades. Over the weekend, Auckland's dams hit 60% full. At this time of the year, it is normally at 85% rather. Met Service meteorologist Georgina Griffiths today addressed the Auckland Council water body, Watercare, which is already grappling with the likelihood of imposing restrictions on Aucklanders until next autumn. She told our reporter Jordan Bond it's looking increasingly likely it'll be a dry remainder of the year.
We're looking at a long-range forecast for the Auckland region that shows an unusually dry spring, September through to about Christmas, more or less. And that's drier than normal, maybe 15 to 20% down, which is a big number over a 4-month period. We've been saying this for quite some time. The models have been very consistent around this drier than normal spring. And they've been very consistent about why, which does lend confidence to the forecast. We've seen a lot of high pressure on the weather map last year and this year. We've noticed that it's a long time between heavy rain events in the region. If you've lived in Auckland a long time like I have, some winters you can barely go outside. You have to take that coat or umbrella every time you go, every day you leave the house. This winter and last winter we had a week between rain events or more. And so while we are expecting, rain during the rest of winter, and of course we will get rain through spring, it's just that frequency is well down. We're not seeing those rainmakers come in. A really low turnout for those lows and fronts that we need.
And so your level of confidence that over the next 4 months that this will be drier than normal?
Fairly high, actually, and that's not something you hear from a long-range forecaster every day. There's good reasons. These high pressures show up well, very clearly in long-range models. These big, slow beasts. The models have done very well last year, showing these highs are hanging around. All winter's done is had some rain events. They've helped. They haven't tracked us any higher. They're just treading water at the moment.
And that's Met Service meteorologist Georgina Griffiths. An ambitious new strategy for protecting New Zealand's plants and wildlife has been launched with the aim of turning around the fate of 4,000 species at risk of extinction. The plan, launched today by the Conservation Minister, sets out 5 core areas over the next 30 years and includes targets for things like carbon storage and getting pigs and deer out of sensitive areas. Our environment reporter Rachel Thomas was at the launch.
Seagulls out in force on a cloudless morning on Wellington's waterfront, oblivious to a plan designed to protect their habitat unfolding in front of them. The Conservation Minister, Eugenie Sage, today unveiled a biodiversity strategy, Te Mana o Te Taio, that sets out a roadmap for the next 30 years.
We need to protect and restore nature. The strategy is about getting the system right, empowering action, and then protecting and restoring nature. We need to go a whole lot further because we've got 4,000 species that are threatened or at risk of extinction, and when people connect with nature, they are enriched by it.
It's ambitious, listing things like eliminating human-driven extinction of native species in the next 5 years and halting the loss of wetlands by 2030. It also promises to keep Mātauranga Māori at its heart and points out the need to strengthen the Crown and treaty partnership. Iwi Chair's Forum spokesperson, Mike Smith, who wasn't at the launch, says he's heard it all before.
Quite often the Crown's idea of engagement is akin to like a shark engaging with a kahawai. One eats the other, or there's such a power imbalance that Māori are not in a position to really advocate for their full interests.
He says a true treaty partnership means the Crown must give up some of its power, something it has consistently failed to do. The last time New Zealand saw a biodiversity strategy was in the year 2000 under then Prime Minister Helen Clark, and listed one of 4 core goals as strengthening government iwi partnerships. It also aimed to turn the tide on the decline of natural ecosystems. But Forest and Bird Chief Executive Kevin Haig says things have just gotten worse since then because the plan wasn't followed up with action.
It fell into the trap of just so many government strategies over very many years of fulfilling a political necessity to have a strategy without the genuine intent to take meaningful action. And so that just ends up as words on a page.
Melanie Mark Shadbolt, Chief Executive of the Māori Biodiversity Group Te Tira Whakamātaki and part of the reference group for the strategy, believes it's more than rhetoric this time.
It talks about the mana of Mātauranga, which is really important. So we have this dichotomy at the moment where Western science is hardly ever challenged. We just assume that when the scientist sits at the table and says that we're losing species, that we accept that because they have the science and data to back it. What we're talking about is ensuring that when our knowledge holders stay the same, that has the same status, that it's invested in, that it's accepted as being true.
Kevin Haig also believes the plan has what it takes to make a difference, but legislation will be needed to back it up. He says mines are currently proposed on nationally important wetlands, and unless laws change, the strategy's goal to prevent further decline of freshwater wetlands will be meaningless.
We need nature, but nature also needs us to protect it. And that means that this strategy, great though it is, has to be followed up by bold and urgent action immediately following this election.
If the incoming government takes up the plan, the next steps will be pairing with treaty partners, local government and landholders. For Checkpoint, Rachel Thomas.
It is 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Charities are warning they are entering a winter like no other as they experience record demand for food parcels in the wake of COVID-19. The Auckland City Mission is distributing 1,000 food parcels a week, a 175% increase on the same time last year. City Missioner Chris Farrelly says the demand is extraordinary and much of it comes from solo mothers who have recently lost jobs.
1,000 food parcels per week equate to 48,000 meals. These are food parcels for a family of four for 4 days. So we're entering a winter like no other, or in the middle of a winter like no other, where demand is still very, very high.
Meanwhile, the Red Cross is giving out $40,000 worth of food vouchers a day to foreigners stranded in New Zealand. The organisation is currently helping 4,000 backpackers, seasonal workers and tourists with food, warm clothing and financial help. The project lead for Red Cross's Visitors Care Manaki Manuhiri program, Rachel O'Connor, says requests for help are rising as people are struggling to find work and flights home and are running out of savings.
At the start of the program, we were seeing probably about 100 applications on average a day, and we're now starting to see between 150 and 180 start to come through. So that's partly the increase in need in the community as people's situations change, and then I think it's partly people's awareness of the program as well.
Rachel O'Connor says government funding for the Red Cross to help stranded foreigners stops at the end of September, but more will be needed as demand is unlikely to reduce by then. More than 10,000 New Zealand and Australian citizens have signed a petition asking the British government to extend their 2-year working visas. For many of the people on the Youth Mobility Scheme, they've spent months of their visa time in lockdown rather than seeing the sights of Europe. So far, extensions have only been granted to visas that are set to expire. The ABC's Samantha Hawley reports.
My name's Sarah. I've been living in London for just on 2 years now. I'm 24 years old and I'm working for an NHS charity here. If I'd have gone home when the government was telling people to go home, I would have been going home to be unemployed and living with my parents and on government payments.
Sarah Kennedy's contract and her youth visa will expire next month.
I just think that there should be a lot more empathy about the difficulties that people are facing.
She's worried getting a seat on a plane will be difficult. The British government has extended visas due to expire until August the 31st. But that doesn't help Sarah. Her visa ends on September the 7th.
I mean, it's pretty clear to me that I'm probably not going to be getting out by the 7th of September, just based off other people's experiences.
My name's Lane Wiseman. I've been in London for the last 8 months working as a teacher.
24-year-old Lane isn't even halfway through her 2-year visa, but her contract with a British school has come to an end and she's heading home to Newcastle.
Obviously, I don't have a lot of money. Been working over here. It's my first time living out of home. It's been a dream that I've had since I was 16 years old. And to come over here and all of this happen and then trying to get home and being denied, it's been a massive roller coaster for me. But I've had my flights changed or cancelled 4 times now with no guarantee of my next flight actually going.
Last month, the Australian government introduced a daily cap on the number of international arrivals. Just 30 passengers per flight are able to land at Sydney Airport, for instance. Some travellers say they've had to purchase business class tickets to ensure they're not bumped from the flight. New Zealander Katie Marnane is in a similar position. She started a petition to try and get the British government to go further and extend the visas until it's easier and cheaper to get home.
It just took off. It was like watching an election or something. The numbers climbed so quickly, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to get 10,000. And I think this morning I looked and it hit 10,000, and I was like, ah!
The British government's indicated it's not willing to offer a further reprieve, but Katie is still hopeful.
We pay a lot of money to have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We just kind of felt really robbed of our time.
For the under-30s, it's a visa of a lifetime. Now their adventures a world away are another coronavirus casualty.
The ABC's Samantha Hawley with that report. Lebanon's army says there's now little hope of finding anyone alive under the rubble of Beirut's port after a massive explosion last week. But grieving families are still waiting for news of what happened to their loved ones, while protesters stormed downtown Beirut and continue to clash with security forces. The ABC's Eric Torchek reports.
Mohammed Zayed sits outside the gates of Beirut's port, looking at the shattered remains of his brother Amin's workplace.
I
stay here all day because I'm waiting for my brother, he says. I'm waiting for him to get out safe and sound, because I can feel deep down that there is still his soul. Amin sent his family a picture from his phone of a port warehouse on fire minutes before the deadly blast rocked the city. His wife Wafa searched the smoking ruins of the port for her husband an hour after the explosion, then went around to hospitals asking in vain. That's a port, a commercial port, an international port, and you bomb it, she says? You store these poisonous materials that can kill people? How is it possible? How could they? How could they store these types of things that they know are explosives? They knew it. You don't let anything into your house without knowing what it is. Even though the recovery work is ramping up thanks to the arrival of international teams, Lebanon's army, which is managing the recovery effort, is now saying there's little hope of finding the missing people alive. In downtown Beirut, protesters clashed with police for the second night in a row, maintaining their rage at the government which oversaw this disaster. Ahmed Shahada came with his family. We want a revolution, and a revolution means blood, he says. Either they kill us or we kill them. Either we live or they live. Some politicians are taking note. The Information Minister, Manal Abdel Samad, resigned, saying Lebanon needed dramatic change. But right now, Lebanon also needs aid, especially food. Many countries joined a donor conference organised by French President Emmanuel Macron, where they pledged $415 million to help. Together we have to do everything we can so that violence and chaos do not win the day, Mr Macron told the conference. Over these days, the future of Lebanon is at stake, the future of the Lebanese people, but also a whole region. The money will be given unconditionally, but further aid is dependent on Lebanon's leaders reforming the political and financial systems. That's something they refused to do before the blast, when Lebanon defaulted on its debts and the International Monetary Fund tried to end the country's financial crisis. It remains to be seen whether the destruction of the capital and the anger of the citizens will now be enough to bring change.
And that was Eric Torchek reporting. The Blues can no longer give their fans a Super Rugby Aotearoa title to celebrate, but the team is still giving some of its youngest supporters a reason to smile. The squad gathered in downtown Auckland this afternoon to clean and repurpose more than 400 pairs of boots for underprivileged kids across the Blues region. It's all part of the team's Best Foot Forward program, which was established in 2017. Sports reporter Clay Wilson was there.
All Blacks and Blues prop Ofa Tuangafasi grew up in Tonga with 11 brothers and sisters before moving to New Zealand when he was 14. He knows exactly what it's like to grow up without something most rugby-playing kids take as a given.
I didn't have a pair of boots when I was in Tonga. I played in barefoot
my first pair when I was 15, so that's when my first year in New Zealand. That was I can still remember, special. And so at one stage I was sharing one with my older brother. So my game was at 9 in the morning, and then I'd wear them, and then when my game finishes I have to, quickly get off the field and take boots off and give it to my older brother. His game was kicked off straight after our game.
The program has now gifted around 1,500 pairs of pre-loved boots to children. All Blacks first five Bowden Barrett says it's fantastic so many people have given away so many boots.
We're just doing our bit to, I guess, refurb them and give those who don't have the opportunity to buy them or for whatever reason play rugby, because I was fortunate enough to either have hand-me-downs or occasionally mum would let me have a brand new pair from time to time. But if it's different between playing rugby or not, then this is a great initiative.
The Blues host the Crusaders on Sunday in what is the last match of Super Rugby Aotearoa. For Checkpoint, Clay Wilson.
If you were listening to Clay's report on radio, we'll put it up on our Facebook page. You can look at the video there to see the boys cleaning and tidying up their boots that they're re-gifting, basically. The Minister for Managed Isolation, Megan Woods, has put out a press statement alerting us to the fact that 1 minute past midnight tonight, people will start to be charged for managed isolation. That's returnees who arrive from that point onwards will be charged. And just a reminder there, for a single person in a room, the charge is $3,100 for the period of isolation. That's 14 days. Additional adults or children sharing that room will be charged $950 and $475 respectively for kids who are part of that as well. And she points out in that statement that that is just a fraction of what the actual cost of managed isolation is. She says the charges cover less than half of the average cost for managed isolation and quarantine facilities. So just to recap, 1 minute past midnight, so basically from Tuesday onwards, people arriving into the country are going to be charged for managed isolation. A few of you getting in touch about the bubble with the Cook Islands potentially happening before the end of the year. You're not keen on it, not keen at all. This person says, stay in New Zealand travelling, don't go to the Cook Islands, our economy needs it too. And someone else says, if the government has a reason why we can't go to the Cook Islands now, what's going to change over the next 3 months to make it safer? The delay is entirely political. Someone else says the industry here needs us to stay here. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The head of the Cook Islands Chamber of Commerce says it could be catastrophic for his country if a travel bubble with New Zealand doesn't open till December. Cabinet has approved the regulations for New Zealanders returning after a holiday or business trip overseas to be charged for their managed isolation. National has again endorsed the ACT Party leader for the Epsom seat, telling supporters to vote for David Seymour and give their party vote to National. And in netball, the top two sides in the ANZ Premiership square off in Wellington tonight. The Central Pulse and the Tactics. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
A few cases, but really very few indeed. So everyone is being cautious. And of course, no one wants to know any Victorians at this point.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
I mean, certainly the figures are showing that the most vulnerable